The agenda. Most everybody is written only for both hearings, but just a couple small things. So House Bill 79, it's very similar. I think it's exactly the same as a bill that we worked out of this committee earlier this year. And the Senate also worked it, and they worked it across the Senate floor before we had an opportunity to do that. So there was no reason for us to work it over the House floor during turnaround. So the plan is to, if it does pass out of committee, we'll just work the Senate bill on this topic. If timing allows, I'd like to work the bill after the hearings today. So just keep that in mind. That's a possibility. And if we're able to do that, looking forward to next week, got permission from the Speaker's office to do a field trip to DCF next Tuesday. Go over and kind of watch them, give a little bit more on-site presentation of the application, eligibility check process. Once again, to talk about that cross-check process, which has been a little bit interesting over the last couple of years. And certainly the next bill, the second bill, we'll have a hearing on today. And based on that field trip next Tuesday, we'll follow that up with kind of a presentation discussion next Thursday on cross-check, all things cross-check, and then from there we'll know what to do with the bill, hopefully. So just a little bit of look ahead for today's meeting and also potential ideas for next week. So any questions on that? Great. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and open the hearing on Senate Bill 79 and ask the revisers to give a quick overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, committee. I'm David Weiss with the Reviser Statutes Office. Senate Bill 79, this is going to, as the chair indicated, this is going to look very familiar to the members of this committee. It is the Senate version of House Bill 2015 that this committee heard and worked prior to the turnaround. It amends the Public Assistance Statute KSA 39709 to propose that the Secretary for Children and Families request a waiver from the USDA to exclude soft drinks and candy from the definition of eligible foods that may be purchased with food assistance or SNAP. And if the waiver is granted, the Secretary would implement the waiver. And if there is no waiver granted, the Secretary is required to annually submit such waiver until the federal government grants the waiver. The Senate Committee on Government Efficiency made the same just technical amendment to the bill that this committee made, just to correct that reference to the definitions. So we're referencing the most current version of the statute after the reconciliation that occurred last session. And the Senate passed Senate Bill 79 by a vote of 29-11. And I can stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, David. Committee, any questions for the revisers? Let's have one. So this is identical to the bill we passed out of our committee earlier. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So seeing none, thank you. So we'll open up the proponent portion of the hearing. We did have one proponent that was going to join via WebEx. That did change to written only. So with that, any comments on the proponents? Does anybody wish to speak as a proponent on the bill? Seeing none, we'll close the proponent portion of the hearing. We'll move on to the opponent portion of the hearing. And I think just due to the fact that this is a similar bill that we already had a hearing on, all opponents are written only, but certainly offer the option if anybody wishes to speak in opposition to the bill, they're welcome to. Seeing none, the opponent portion of the hearing is closed. Anybody wish to speak neutrally on the bill? Seeing none, the hearing on Senate Bill 79 is closed. So move on then to hearing on Senate Bill 85 and ask the revisers to give a quick description of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Weiss again with the Revisor Statutes Office. Senate Bill 85 would direct the Secretary for Children and Families to enter into agreements with state agencies for the continuous review and comparison of data for public assistance eligibility. This is, again, similar to a bill that the House had heard, House Bill 2360. That was in this, that's still in this committee, but there is a slight difference there in the subsection A. 2360 did talk about how the Secretary for Children and Families and the Secretary of Health and Environment would enter into these data management agreements with commercial entities or present to the LCC prior to November 1, 2025, commercial or options to compare data. Senate Bill 85 does not have that language in it. It says that to verify eligibility for food assistance, the Secretary would enter into data matching agreements with state agencies to compare data related to households and routine food assistance and other state data sets. The Secretary would receive and review state information that may affect eligibility for the food assistance program from the Office of Vital Statistics, Department of Labor, Department of Revenue, Department of Corrections, the Kansas Lottery, Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission, along with out-of-state electronic benefit transfer transactions. The Secretary would also be required to act on certain data from federal sources that are maintained by the Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the FBI. And then on at least a quarterly basis, the Secretary would make available to the public on the Kansas Department for Children and Families website data from findings of noncompliance and fraud investigations in food assistance for the following aggregate non-confidential, non-person identifiable information: number of households investigated, total number of households referred to the Attorney General's Office for Prosecution, improper payments and expenditures, monies received, data concerning improper payments and ineligible recipients as a percentage of those investigated and reviewed, and finally, the amount of funds expended by electronic benefit card transactions outside of Kansas. The Senate Committee on Government Efficiency did amend Senate Bill 85 to remove a review of earned income information, death records, incarceration records, supplemental security income information, beneficiary records, and earnings information and pension information maintained by the U.S. Social Security Administration. That's stricken that. That is actually on the amendment there is on page 2, lines 4 through 7 of the bill. There was some testimony in committee that some of the federal requirements to try to receive that data is burdensome, and it can't be really accessed without some additional procedures. So the Senate Committee on Government Efficiency removed that data set from the federal review and passed Senate Bill 89 by a vote of 30 to 10. I can stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
David, committee, any questions for the reviser? So, seeing none, thank you very much. We'll open up the hearing, the proponent portion of the hearing for Senate Bill 85. I think we do have one proponent in person. Welcome, Steve Green. Welcome to Committee Operations Solutions Project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm not going to spend a lot of time testifying or using your all's time. This is, as the chairman said, my name is Steve Green on behalf of Opportunity Solutions Project. Senate Bill 85 is very similar to what you all have seen before. It does limit it to specifically just to DCF. It does not have that component with KDHE, so the Medicaid side has been removed. But then also to some of the opponent testimony, specifically DCF, with concerns about the fiscal impact, removing the requirement to check with the Social Security Administration the various forms of data that they would house to determine eligibility. Again, I think the policy itself is good policy. It has the same reporting on fraud that I think is important. I know that's something that DCF has mentioned that they're working on and have and are doing, so we just think that should be publicly available and transparent and easy to access. But other than that, that's overall, believe the legislation is good and would appreciate your support. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, committee. Any questions? Representative Brownlee Page.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, what data do you have to support your claim
Which, Mr. Chair, if I may,
for 85? Excuse me.
Mr. Chair, ma'am, if you, would you be what specific claim?
Well, you're saying that there's fraud and
Sure.
people, I'm just saying, what do you have to support
Yeah.
that? You're making the claim, but what data do you have to support it?
Mr. Chair, if I may, so that's actually a great question, and I'm thankful that you asked it. A couple things. There is a report that, and again, DCF has a fraud team within the their SNAP program. That's something that they have oversight of. They could provide to you a list of the amount of fraudulent claims that they've investigated as part of their fraud team, but also the end result of that, if that ended into it was dismissed because it was, just somebody thinking that it was fraud and it wasn't, or it was actually gone to trial and they recouped or they awarded a judgment to the state, or in this case, the feds. There's a couple ways that you can approach the fraud. They mentioned, or this was mentioned maybe a couple weeks ago, there's for instance, EBT skimming. Now, skimming operations are completely different than what we're thinking about as far as retail transaction fraud, or somebody getting benefits that are improper. And again, DCF, they're the experts, they can talk about that. The last statistic that I've seen is that overall, the amount of SNAP food stamp fraud is around 7% of the total budget. That sounds like small potatoes, but when you think of 7% on a $400 to $500 million a year program, that's pretty substantial. And there's all kinds of different types of fraud that they would use or that they can engage in. You could also, so there is a USDA report that they have to provide that would list all the fraud that's occurring in Kansas and then also nationally. So is that?
For me, it didn't answer the question, but thank you.
Sure.
Trying to.
Happy to talk offline and see if I can get to that specific question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't help but notice the last page of your, thank you for being here, the last page of your testimony, it talks about wanting to, quote unquote, protect the truly needy on the food stamps program. Can you explain how that's consistent with your organization's testimony on different welfare bills, starting with this one?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, if I may. If somebody is eligible because they've met all the income requirements to receive food stamps, they should be able to receive that.
And do you feel that the income limit is realistic?
Mr. Chair, if I may, when you mean for which population?
Well, for example, here, when folks are applying for food assistance, do you think the income level is sufficient, the cutoff?
Mr. Chair, if I may, yeah, I think that's the federal policy that we have to work with, and that is the reality of the program itself. And so that's the intent when we say the truly needy or those that need assistance. That's the population that we're speaking to.
Well, I hope it's not against the rules to note the other bill y'all are testifying on today directly targets what I would consider to be the truly needy. Thank you.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Green, for your presentation here today. You mentioned earlier, with respect to my colleague Brownlee Page, the question that she presented. You mentioned that there was a 7% figure of fraud, and I do remember this somewhat from previous testimony. However, prior to that, you also mentioned that there were many different kinds of fraud. So, and you stated that the 7% was a relatively large number. I'm curious if you could tell us what percentage of that 7% is actually individual fraud as opposed to that fraud that is taking place like by the retailer and others. So when we're speaking about how this is affecting the individual, how much of that 7% is actually the individual end user of the SNAP benefits?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think that's a fair and appropriate question. There is various types of fraud, to your point, whether it's skimming or retail fraud, but then there's individual, and I don't have that number for me, and I'm not going to, I would rather get you, or at least look into what that actual number is than give you a made-up number.
Okay, I can appreciate that. If memory serves me correctly, that number was somewhere sub 1%. But I would appreciate it if you got that number to us. Thank you.
Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one more question on this phrase, the truly needy. How does your organization define truly needy?
Mr. Chair, if I may. So I think that is a fair question. I think pertaining to this bill, it's in what this bill set out to accomplish, or when you think about food assistance, if they're eligible for food assistance, that would be part of the category of truly needy. Just speaking to this bill for this program.
I can think of many of my constituents I would define as truly needy who don't fall under that category. Thank you.
Representative Roser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about the implementation of this bill. So it would take an additional interface to be able to run this program, right?
Mr. Chair, if I may, it could. There are definitely those types of tools out there, digital tools that could do that, but this bill doesn't specifically say that they have to use any type of tool. It'd just be something that they would manage within their daily workflow.
Okay. And then did you testify for this on the Senate side as well?
Mr. Chair, if I may, yes, I did.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about the fiscal note attached to this and what that would look like for us to pass this bill?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I haven't, frankly, haven't looked at the new fiscal note that came over here. I don't know to what extent that removing the requirement for the Social Security Administration, to what extent that reduced the fiscal note. I think that would probably be a question for DCF that they could answer. Okay, and then to follow up, are you familiar with the CCWIS system? CWIS? Mm-hmm. If it's the one that I'm thinking with related, Mr. Chair, to child welfare, yes, I am. Okay, would they be able to use that system to implement this program or system? Mr. Chair, if I may, I don't know. Okay. Yeah, thank you, though. I don't know the answer to that. Okay, so that's my biggest question is the financial burden that this would take on the legislature, would be how much this would cost us to do. And then also, if we already have we have two, and the federal government has $2 million appropriated for that $4 million CWIS. So if it's something that we can use that program for, that'd be great. But if we're appropriating additional funds, that would be something I would want to know the answer to as well. Yep. No follow-up questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Humphries.
Along those lines, Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering if we could get a new fiscal note, or did a new one come with the amendment? Because I know, at the beginning of the session, KLRD sent out a memo to all the chairs that said if a bill is amended in committee, they will do a new fiscal note for it. Mm-hmm. Maybe we have to ask. I don't know. Yes. Okay.
I mean, Mr. Chair, either or with the Kansas Legislative Research Department. A new fiscal note could be drafted. However, it needs to be requested by the chair.
So I'm happy to request one. The question that I would have is just as drafted, yeah, I can certainly request one, because we're going to try to dive into this a little bit more next week and get a better understanding of the process, where that fiscal note's driven from. And I would imagine that before this bill would go anywhere, if it went anywhere, yeah, I don't want to jump ahead. I'll talk about that after the hearing. Yes, I will request one. Could, Idai, could you pass that along? Request for a fiscal note? All right, thank you. Representative Barth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Green. I do have a question, and it's, I see that this came from the, what's it called, the Kansas Efficiency Committee, that this came from, correct?
Yep, Mr. Chair, yeah, Committee on Government Efficiency.
So we're trying to be more efficient. We're trying to catch folks from a bidirectional standpoint, looking for, someone who might be, should not be in the system, I guess I could say. And yet I'm seeing that DCF is estimating 111 positions needed to manage this. And I'm like, that's not, not very efficient. So to me, this seems like this is a spreadsheet algorithm that gets written to catch that information. So I don't know if you have any expertise or feedback to us on that, of what could be done to help. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, I think that is a fair question. I'm not going to, so as somebody who worked in state government and helped produce fiscal notes, I know, fiscal notes can have a range of how you apply what's in statute, and so I don't feel like DCF is being unfair in their estimate if they had to do all those different tasks. I think there's a bit of a fair point that would be potentially a new workflow. Again, there is also, though, software or programs that provide this. I do think, so this is getting into a whole nother conversation about, to what extent are we looking to see, are people still eligible for benefits in a prior life and job? Did a bit of this kind of work in a different state. And what you would see in the policy is that there could be a population of people that would otherwise no longer be receiving these benefits because they had a change of income or they've moved out of state, or other determining factors that would change their eligibility. And I think the intent is to get to that sort of regular checking, because, and they've mentioned this, that the overpayment rate for food assistance right now is around 12%. That's, you can say that that's the national average is, well, it's only 11%, but there's outliers like Alaska, I think is 65%. Most states are around, 7 to 5%. Even in the other surrounding states, Kansas is the highest of the ones. So it's really getting to what's causing this overpayment of benefits, when historically it's been more around anywhere from 5 to 2.5%. So I think that's, and again, 12% on $450 million is a lot of money. And so that's what it's trying to look at.
Representative Owsley.
Mr. Chair. And if I'm off base, please correct me. But Stephen, you mentioned that, you had worked in state government, and if I recall correctly, you were with DCF either during or right prior to the feasibility study that we developed, I want to say in 2017 for the C-SWIS system. And if you have more up-to-date knowledge than I, please inform me, or if DCF would like to correct me. At that time, it was described to us in layperson's term, DCF was operating on a little bit more than a shoebox in an old IBM system. And to my knowledge, we're still waiting for the development of the C-SWIS system. So as your previous experience has been brought up and the data system has been brought up, I think we know that DCF doesn't have the technology to, handle SB 85 as is today. And I guess I'd let you comment on that if you'd like to.
Like, Mr. Chair, if I may, it's like bringing back the good old days. I actually think that, there's a lot of alphabet soup. I don't even know if it's called CWIS or it's SACWIS now, and that's the new child welfare system. I'm sure that there's probably a program, and this is true of other states, that have green screens for different eligibility or programs that they run. But I would say that experience is not just unique to Kansas, of having antiquated systems.
But you understand Kansas has an antiquated system.
Mr. Chair, for child welfare? Yeah, I haven't looked at the key system. I think that's what they use for their eligibility determination. I think that's a different program. But yeah, I'm happy to take a look at the program if the ranking minority member would want to surf the web with me, I guess. I don't know. That was meant to be funny. I apologize.
I'll refrain from further comment.
Representative Roser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It would be unfair to ask you of that because you don't work for DCF. And so I acknowledge that. And I did ask yesterday. And it sounds like when the $2 million was appropriated for that system, the federal government matched the $2 million. And that system has to be approved, that contract. And so there is not a contract that has been approved yet, to my understanding, as of yesterday when I asked. So to answer your question in layman's term, yes?
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So he was the only proponent we had on our list. Any other proponents that wish to speak to the bill? Seeing none, we'll close the proponent portion of SB 85 and open up the opponent portion of the bill. We have everyone listed as written only. Is there anybody to speak in opposition to the bill? See, oh, yes, please come on up. Yeah, please state your name and welcome to committee.
Am I good now? Sorry about that. My name is Haley Kotler. I'm a campaign director at Kansas Appleseed, a statewide nonprofit working to build thriving, inclusive, and just communities. We have a long history of advocating for food security and assisting Kansans in navigating public benefits. We do believe oversight is important, but we believe that SB 85 adds unnecessary and costly layers to an already rigorous process. As you know, DCF currently cross-checks applications against multiple databases, including KEYS, Social Security, citizen recordships. I totally butchered that. The Kansas Department of Labor, and more. They also have fraud detection tools, an investigative unit, and a public fraud hotline. I think that you all will see that next week on your field trip. Additionally, we believe that this bill duplicates existing efforts, requiring 113 new state employees, far exceeding the $500,000 in total fraud identified across all assistance programs in 2023. If the goal is to improve program efficiency, of course, we want to see that as well. We would love to see the state work to streamline existing processes for SNAP, as well as address other sources of fraud, such as skimming. Skimming has been in the press lately. I'm not sure if anyone saw, but DCF caught basically a criminal operative in Kansas City that was skimming and getting benefits off of people's cards, but it was quickly dealt with. So I think I'll just close and ask you all to oppose SB 85 and instead support policies that strengthen SNAP and help Kansans thrive. And then if I could make one more point, it was talked about a little bit ago about overpayments, and I just wanted to share that overpayments, of course, I don't know the data like others, but families do have to pay those overpayments back, whether it's their fault or whether it's the state's fault, is my understanding. So I just wanted that point of clarification. Thank you all for allowing me to be here today, and I will stand for questions.
Thank you very much. So I don't see testimony. So Gary, did you receive her? Okay, so it is on the S drive. All right. Thanks for submitting that. Okay. All right. Thanks for submitting that. Committee, any questions? Or Ms. Hoffman? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other opponents wishing to speak to the bill? Seeing none, we'll close the opponent portion of Senate Bill 85. Anybody wishing to speak neutral on the bill? Seeing none, we'll close the neutral portion of the hearing.
I don't know if I'm out of order. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, we can bring.
Yeah, Carla Whiteside Hicks.
If she would wish to answer, certainly welcome. So welcome to committee, Dr. Carla Whiteside Hicks.
Thank you.
And Representative Brownlee Page.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Hicks.
Yes.
With the cuts that are going on now in the federal government, what kind of impact will that have on the state? Because if you're asked to do all of this, and in your report, you say where you have 4 things, no, wait a minute. Yeah, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things your department is currently doing, but you currently don't have the technology to do it with 2 things. And I don't know how far it's going to come down to us on the state, because they're cutting back, trying to make government more efficient. And how can it be efficient if you're going to be asked to do all of this and not have the proper technology to do it with? So what's your concern about the federal level with Elon Musk and everybody cutting and doing stuff? It takes money to do things. You're trying to eliminate some things, but it does take money to do it. So what do you fear, or what are your concerns? Will you lose any people in your department? What's going on, and what kind of impact will this have on this, what some people want to do?
Sorry, thank you for that question. The simple answer, although it's probably not the preferred answer, is that we don't know. We have heard that some of our federal sources will be reduced. For example, there's conversation about reducing the amount of TANF funds that states receive. It's important to understand that when we're talking about system changes, when we fund those, it is not through one funding source. We use cost allocation, and so if it is a change in our system that is going to impact multiple programs, then we take an appropriate portion of funds from each of those programs. So if our federal funding is decreased, we do not have the funds that we need for this, and there is always a state portion that is needed for these changes. So we are concerned with not just not being able to afford the system changes that we need, but also the staffing. Can we afford to hire new staff to go through the changes to implement the changes that are being required?
Can I ask a follow-up? How long will it take you to train people to use these new systems? I mean, it's one thing I know with the school district, we would train, but we had so many complications. We didn't have enough people to train people, and then taking the time, people wanted to be paid overtime to come in because we couldn't work it out. Now, government may be better than us. So do you have enough time to train people? How long will it take to make the system work?
So it depends on what you mean by enough time. I can tell you this, a real world example. We are changing how we administer our TANF program in that our current career navigators who historically have focused on simply helping the adults in the household find employment and reduce their barriers. I'm now having 60 career navigators trained to also do eligibility work. So if I'm on your caseload, you're not just helping me find a job. If it's time for my food assistance review, you are processing my food assistance review so that I don't have to go through, yet another person to have things done. We already know it will take us a solid year to get those 60 individuals trained to the point that they are fully functioning in their roles as eligibility workers.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm not asking for an exact number on these two questions, but so my first question is kind of a broad question of that database. So how many, not entries, but how many people, unique people, do you have on that database that you're working with currently?
I do not have that number. What I can tell you is that if we're talking about KEYS, our eligibility determination system.
Yeah, but you probably have some that are in addition to that that you still have on your files or on that database, correct?
I'm sorry, the old database or the new one?
The new one.
The new one. I don't. We're probably talking close to 500,000 individuals, because understand it's not just individuals who are receiving food assistance. Childcare assistance is part of that. Our TANF program, LEAP, summer EBT, foster care payments are in there. So, and then of course, there's a medical side to that also, because it's the same eligibility determination system. So it's not just what DCF houses, it's also information that KDHE would house, and it's the same system.
And just to clarify on that first answer of the 500,000, but some of those are dual because they might be partaking of 3 different things, so that it's not one unique entry. It might be one is eligible for 3.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So it might not be 500,000.
Correct.
So, and then my second part of that is currently, and again, you don't have to be exact, but currently, how many people, including the people you're training, how many people do you have coming in on staff?
I believe currently we have approximately 300 eligibility workers across the state. And like I said, or I have said, hiring is an issue. And so one of my responses to not having new people coming in simply because they're not applying for those positions is to train existing staff to assume some of those responsibilities so that we can maintain timeliness.
So the 300, is that what you have, FTEs that you have now, but then you'll be adding 60 more, or to bring you to 360?
And those 60, to be clear, they are currently employed. So they're currently employed. We are simply adjusting their current job responsibilities within their existing pay grade so that they can assume some of those additional responsibilities. So these are not new individuals.
But they are working on this new system, learning the new system.
Correct.
Coming up to speed.
Yes.
And then you're not losing any people, but of the 300, they will be moving over into the new system. Is that correct?
We are already using the new system. We have been using KEYS exclusively since 2017, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So we are using the news. We still have some functionality in the old system. For example, the Social Security interface that we currently have, that goes through our old DOS-based system. So we do still have some things. The child welfare side of the house has a program that is solely in that old system. And so part of, we've talked about CWIS a lot. That's not my side of the house. But part of that system upgrade, if you will be moving those functions that we still have in the legacy system over to the new system.
So what I'm hearing you say is that pretty much most of your people are onto the new system?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for being willing to take a few questions. Any more questions on Senate Bill 85? Seeing Representative Brownlee Page.
Can we ask Mr. Hare a question? I think he's here. I thought I saw him. Dustin Hare, he submitted a written report. Okay, and thank you.
So seeing no more questions, we'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 85. Once
Clarify.
Okay, so and those electronic copies are on the S drive. Okay. Very good. Thanks, Gary. So we'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 85 once again. And committee, that's the two hearings we had for the day. So normally it's not typical to work a bill the same day of a hearing, but because we heard a bill very similar to Senate Bill 79 regarding the waiver request to prohibit the purchase of candy and soft drinks with food assistance dollars. We already heard that earlier this year, worked it out of committee as a House bill. This is the same bill that came to us from the Senate. So we just heard that earlier today. I'd like to work it today. It does require 2/3 approval from the committee. So I'll ask the committee, are there any objections to working Senate Bill 79 today? So, slight clarification. We do need 2/3 to pass the bill out of committee. So we'll just open up, see if we get 2/3 when it comes to that. So, we'll go ahead and open up discussion then on Senate Bill 79. We already had the reviser discuss the bill. Does anybody need any further description of the bill from the revisers? Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I promise this is a genuine question, despite how it may sound. Would fruit snacks qualify as candy?
So we have to go back to the definition.
That's what prompted my question. In fact, Mr. Chair, was I personally love a good fruit snack, and I thought that sounds like fruit snacks. But that's also such a common food we see in kids' lunches and things, hence my question. And I thought perhaps the reviser may know.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the definition of candy that is found currently in KSA 793602 means a preparation of sugar, honey, or other natural or artificial sweeteners in combination with chocolate, fruits, nuts, or other ingredients or flavorings in the form of bars, drops, or pieces. Candy does not include any preparation containing flour and shall require no refrigeration. So I think it might depend on the specific fruit snacks and how those are formed, what if they have sugar or any of those things in there. So it may be case by case.
Oh, good. I'll spend some time in the grocery aisle looking. Thank you.
I know they're out there without sugar. My wife ends up getting a few of those. So for committee, any discussion on Senate Bill 79? Representative Owsley.
Mr. Chair, in an effort not to disappoint, I have an amendment. No, while David's passing out the amendment, I can give it a go to describe, and the reviser can play cleanup. So it is not the same amendment. We had our fun last time, and this was heard on the Senate floor, and this would require, as we're stating that the secretary shall apply for waivers, to also apply for a prepared food or a hot foods waiver. And then in the spirit of the bill, if that waiver is not accepted, to reapply every year thereafter. David, did I do a decent enough job on that?
So committee, we have an amendment offered by Representative Owsley. He described it. Any other questions, clarifications before I ask for a second? From the reviser, I have a question from Representative Riley. Is this for the reviser on the amendment? Just, yeah. Okay, so we'll wait. So seeing Representative Hellwig, this is more just if there's any clarification on the amendment, but not really a discussion on the amendment. If there's, okay, Representative Hellwig.
So it says says dietary supplements. Can we define what dietary supplements are?
I think, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the definition of dietary supplements is the same as is currently in the Kansas retailer sales tax statutes. That again, that's KSA 79, this is 3606 triple J. And my computer died. I could get you the specific definition here in just a second.
So in the meantime, I'll ask, is there a second on the amendment? We have a second by Representative Carr. And while the reviser's looking up the definition of dietary supplement, any further? We'll just pause for a moment until we get that definition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it's a dietary supplement would mean any product other than tobacco intended to supplement the diet that one contains one or more of the following dietary ingredients: a vitamin, mineral, herb, botanical, amino acid, dietary substance for use by humans to supplement the diet by increasing total dietary intake, or a concentrate, metabolic, constituent, extract, or combination of any such ingredient. Two is intended for ingestion in tablet, capsule, powder, soft gel cap, or liquid form, or if not intended for digestion in such form, is not represented as a conventional food, is not represented for use as a sole item of a meal or of the diet, and is required to be labeled as a dietary supplement in accordance with federal regulations.
Okay. Representative Hellwig, any follow-up on that? Okay. Representative Riley?
So I would like to just make a supplement to that, and that is for anybody that takes a vitamin C vitamin or anything like that, that if you look on the bottle, it's basically saying that this product is not intended to solve any medical problem, is really the bottom line was saying. So it's, this product is not intended by any doctor or anybody else to solve anything. So that's, I mean, the other thing is the positive here, but the negative of that is it's not to solve any, you know, if you got cancer or something like that, taking a lot of vitamin C is not going to solve that problem, is what they're saying, right? So it's something that's used by all of the food supplement business of saying, we're not here to cure anything, we're just to help you out. And so it's a very broad statement of what this comes through. And so anything from vitamin C to zinc or magnesium or anything that people would take, those are all good things. So.
Representative Humphries?
I think I answered my own question just by reading a little further. Thank you.
Representative Owsley?
Thank you. And just to comment off the last statement, I'm not going to claim to be a dietary supplement label expert, but it seems to me if they're federally regulated and they're federally defined, then I see no problem with this. And I think of us here facing what I refer to as a session plague, and I know there's plenty of supplements going around in your emergency and whatnot trying to keep the cough and the sneezes away. So just comment.
Representative Roser?
This might be for the revisor. Are dietary supplements covered by WIC? It's my understanding that the packages do cover them. I think for like the prenatal packages, women, infants, and children, that program.
So can you restate the question?
Does WIC cover dietary supplements?
Mr. Chair, I'd have to do some research on that. I don't know if somebody from DCF or somebody that's more familiar with the WIC program would be able to answer that, but I'm not, I don't know.
It seems like, Doctor, but if you don't know, we can kind of, it's a KDHE program. So I think Idaida might be doing a little research on that, so we might be able to pull an answer soon, but maybe not. Any questions on the amendment? Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like this amendment, and I think we're working on trying to define supplements. Could the carrier of the bill, I think I know what he means, but can you define a little bit more the prepared food part? I think rotisserie chicken, I think pizza. What are you thinking?
Mr. Chair. I think you're thinking exactly what I was thinking. The rotisserie chicken, the sliced pizza at Casey's, or the pizza at Casey's, it's an alternative to prepackaged, more processed foods that are hot and available for immediate consumption and for folks that might not otherwise have a way to cook.
Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the prepared food edition undermines the whole intent of the bill because it would essentially lead to, you could purchase anything, fast food or a fried Snickers at the fair with that exemption. It's anything that's heated or served with utensils. So it's a very broad definition of prepared food. So I think if we're trying to go the route of limiting what is purchased, that would open the Pandora's box of unhealthy options in my mind. So thank you.
Representative Roser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Prepared food, as it states in KSA 79-3602, Foods sold in a heated state or heated by the seller. 2 or more food ingredients mixed or combined by the seller for sale as a single item. Foods sold with eating utensils provided by the seller. Prepared food does not include food that is only cut, repackaged, or pasteurized by the seller. Eggs, fish, meat, poultry, or foods containing those raw animal foods that require cooking. Soft drinks, so prepared food does not include soft drinks, meaning non-alcoholic beverages. And then it's got, like milk products, stuff like that.
Representative Simmons?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we not just make that clear? No state fair food? I mean, that seems like a pretty simple solution if that's a real concern. And that's a serious suggestion.
Representative Owsley?
Thank you. And just to comment off the last one. So the prepared foods amendment has been, or the waiver has been granted in like 5 states under disaster, situations. So unlike the underlying bill waiver that it's requesting, it has actually come to fruition. But I would anticipate if this bill passes, the secretary is going to apply for both waivers, and if both waivers are produced, then I don't think you'd be able to buy the Snickers bar in the first place. So I don't think the fried Snickers bar at the state fair is really an issue here.
Representative Brownlee Page?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarity, I want to make sure I'm on the right page with you. I see what you're doing with that, but let's go back to the candy and the pop. So is that off the record, or we're just doing what you proposed in the amendment?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question, Representative. This would be in addition to the soda pop and the candy bars.
So you would still keep that on?
We're not striking that language out of the bill. I did not go that far.
Okay. That's where my issue is. I think it's absurd. You can let a Twinkie and a Kit Kat go, and we're on this healthy kit, and we have so many deserts in certain parts of our states where people can't get to stuff. Then they don't have the money to buy the healthy stuff. So I already said that before. I'll stop. But that still bothers me.
Representative Owsley?
Thank you. So just to kind of respond to that, I think that's where this amendment would go, is that those spots that are food deserts, you're going to be more likely to come across a truck stop or a gas station that's going to have, some prepared foods versus, a grocery store with healthy options. And this would be asking, for a waiver to where if that convenience store, that's just my example, were a SNAP participant, then you would also be able to utilize that. And since we're telling them they can't buy sugary drinks or candy bars at that convenience store, you could get something of substance.
Representative Brownlee Page?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the explanation. I like that, but I still have a problem with the candy and the pop. I'm gonna hold on to that. I'll go down with the ship on that one. Thank you.
Representative Humphreys?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So actually, Representative Owsley answered some of my question that, part of the issue here is who participates in SNAP, right? And so I'm curious if those other waivers that you mentioned in emergency situations, like did they open it up to, because this clearly fast food would be included in this. No? Okay. But if they took SNAP, McDonald's could be included because it's a prepared food. Just if they took SNAP, right? But my question really was, in those emergency situations, did those kind of places get some sort of temporary SNAP, authorization that they could take SNAP?
So, or is that a question for the reviser? Would this include fast food?
Yeah,
So
sure.
at a
Great question.
example
Yeah,
is
curious about that.
So the question is, does this amendment, specifically prepared food, include fast food type meals?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Prepared food is defined in 17 KSA 793602, means food sold in a heated state or heated by the seller. Two or more food ingredients mixed or combined by the seller for sale as a single item, or food sold with eating utensils provided by the seller, including but not limited to plates, knives, forks, spoons, glasses, cups, napkins, or straws. Plate does not include a container or packaging used to transport the food. Prepared food does not include food that is only cut, repackaged, or pasteurized by the seller, or eggs, fish, meat, poultry, or foods containing raw animal foods that require cooking by the consumer as recommended by the Food and Drug Administration to prevent foodborne illnesses. I mean, that's the definition.
So based on that, prepared food would include fast food. I think the example of McDonald's, or even sitting down at a Applebee's or Olive Garden, that would be included in prepared food, correct?
If it's food sold with eating utensils provided by the seller, it could fall under that definition.
And we're going to move on, and then we'll come back. So Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sometimes in these committees, it amazes me, certainly the hypocrisy that comes from the comments that are made in these committees.
Representative Carr, I'm going to stop you right there. Please do not use words which kind of impugn the motives of other members. To use the word hypocrisy, I think it's going a little bit too far, so I would ask you to refrain from using that word.
But let me say this, with all due respect, if you don't live in a food desert, then I don't want to hear you as part of this conversation, because I live in a food desert. And for those that don't, you may not like the term hypocrisy, but if you haven't lived it, then you really don't know it.
Representative
So I have issue with that.
Representative Carr, your time is up. Representative Esau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think during the emergency, when they were letting hot food be used or be purchased in that way, from what you had, what the representative said earlier, it was like if you went to Hy-Vee and you got prepared food to go instead of staying there, and they allowed they had some leeway in there, I think, in some of the supplemental plans, like the senior meals, that sort of thing. I don't recall, though, that it ever allowed fast food, such as what we're thinking drive-through kind of thing, although there's healthy fast food, too. I can go to certain places and get very healthy things. So I can buy really bad stuff at the grocery store, too. So sometimes it's not the place, it's what you're getting.
Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if there was any consideration of the definition adopted by the state for the exemption on food tax. I remember there was a pretty lengthy discussion on prepared foods very specifically. And yeah, I'm wondering if it could be useful here to clear some of this up, because we've had these conversations, almost identical conversations in the past.
Is that a question specifically for?
Well, I think whoever wants to answer it.
And can you restate the question?
Yeah, was there any consideration of adopting the definition of prepared foods that was used in the state sales tax exemption on food?
Ask the revisor's office to maybe clarify that question.
Thank you, Mr. Yeah, the definition that's here in the amendment, that does come from the sales tax statute. So that was the definition used for the sales tax discussion.
Thank you.
Representative Roser?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From ks.revenue.gov, where it describes the food sales tax rate reduction, it does give a very specific example of prepared food prepared food taxed at the reduced state sales tax rate. The example is at a fast food restaurant, hamburgers are cooked and placed in a warming tray. The hamburgers are prepared food because they are heated by the seller, the fast food restaurant. So yes, fast food would be covered under prepared food, according to what I found from ks.revenue.gov.
Representative Carr, I think you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Respectfully, living in a food desert, it is difficult oftentimes to find foods that you can purchase that are within your means of acquiring them. In my particular district, we have a truck stop. We don't have a grocery store. We have a truck stop. And for us to begin to limit those things that can be purchased, oftentimes I think that we forget that this is welfare reform. The reason that there's welfare is because there are people that are out there that we're attempting to help. Excuse me. Or so one would believe that we would be attempting to help these people. If you're unable to purchase foods, and then we make we put limitations on the foods that you can purchase. And if you're unable to purchase foods, then what is it that you're expected to eat if we can no longer purchase foods that have sugars? Then we can no longer purchase foods that are warmed. And then we don't have a grocery store. And again, I take a level of personal offense because we don't have a grocery store. And if you've never lived in an area where there's no grocery store, then again, respectfully, it makes it really difficult for you to be able to make a good decision based on the fact that it's something that you've never experienced in your life. I feel like that this would be a good amendment because at that truck stop, certainly, I agree that there may be some delineation from something like McDonald's, but they sell the preheated pizzas. They sell the chicken that's already cooked. They sell the French fries and those things. And oftentimes, that's what people have to buy for their families to eat because they don't have any way of getting anything else. The weather was horrible yesterday. We had weather several days ago, last week or whatever it was, where you couldn't really get out. When you don't have a means to get out and get away, you've got to go and eat those things that are available. And again, I'll stand in support of this amendment simply because I know that those in the community that I serve would benefit from it. And if I'm correct, what we're supposed to be doing here as legislators are doing things that are best for the constituents of the state of Kansas. Thank you.
So just for the record, I grew up about 10 miles from the closest grocery store. Not sure where you live in Wichita, if there's a grocery store within 10 miles. But on that point, though, if we're taking a look at prepared foods versus kind of what I believe is the intended use of the SNAP dollars, which is the nutritional program to help with the nutritional supplemental assistance program. The idea is to help with some of the foods which people can take home and have at the home to eat at a later time. And that's kind of the way it works when there is not a close grocery store. We would buy food for the week, and typically when it's not prepared food, it costs a lot less than buying prepared food, so that dollar goes a much longer distance as far as purchasing food. And certainly growing up, that was very important in a large household. And so we did live quite a bit far away from a grocery store, and we had to stretch the dollar. And the means that we used to do that is to not buy prepared food. Prepared food was a luxury growing up. So I am very familiar with that. And I also know what a family has to do in order to make the dollar stretch. Representative Brownlee Page.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too, like Representative Carr, still live in a desert area. And I'm just blessed that I had a job, I have a car, I can get where I need to go to get what I want. And it's not a poor man's venture to eat healthy. It's not if you're trying to eat healthy, it's expensive. And you're only given a certain amount of food stamps. And it can go quick when you're trying to buy. I can get the juice. It may not be 100% pure orange juice, but I can get a cheaper brand. And I understand we do want people to be healthy, but it's expensive and it's not easy. And it's extremely difficult when you don't have a car. And I know in Kansas City, Kansas, our buses don't run 24/7. And if you don't have transportation, you're going to get whatever you can get. And it's not going to fall within the definition of what we have here. People are struggling and they're hurting. I'm not saying nobody else here understands that. But when you're in the urban core, it's a different beat. And I'm quite sure there's some rural areas people are struggling. I get that. But I think sometimes we forget. It's easy to say, oh, they shouldn't buy. You're going to buy whatever you can get to feed who you need to feed. And it may not be the healthiest thing, but it's what I got the money to do it with. That's all I'm saying. And I'm not knocking anybody else, but we just got to remember, we're blessed. I think everybody in here is blessed. But a lot of people are struggling. And sometimes we kind of forget. I have to remind myself every day. So that's all I'm saying. But I get what he's saying, because we're still arguing. We used to have a grocery store almost in every area. We're down to 2, and they have Merck, which is too expensive. People can't afford it. And they'll say, well, you need to go to the Merck. Have you ever been there? You got to have some money to shop in there. So that's all I'm saying. If we would please consider that.
Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And back to the fast food. A quick Google search here says you can use an EBT card at McDonald's if you live in a state that participates in the restaurant meals program. So the state of Kansas would also have to apply for the restaurant meals program through Kansas, and McDonald's would have to become a SNAP participant. So I think that's a moot point. But then the comment was made, you know, that prepared food was a luxury or a treat. I think folks on SNAP deserve a luxury or a treat, because in the same bill, if it passes, we're taking away a candy bar and a soda pop that, you know, a parent might want to get for their child as a reward or a celebration. And I personally am a fan of the rotisserie chickens. And I know when we bring them home, my kids tear them up. So, you know, like, that's better than mom's chicken. I'm going to say that. Sorry. But moving on.
If she needs a recipe, my wife's chicken's better than the rotisserie. Low and slow. All right, any further questions on the amendment? So seeing none, Representative Owsley, you may close.
You know, I thank the committee for their discussion, and, you know, part of me hesitates to even close on this. I am with the representative that I think the underlying bill is not good. However, I think if we're going to apply for that waiver, and we're going to request that the secretary apply for that waiver, and we're going to put this through, maybe we can do a little bit of good as well, and try to get folks some hot food options for those that, you know, might be the only alternative that they have, you know, within their traveling means. and certainly for the folks that may have no other means to heat food. So I would rather have the hot food option than, cold cereal again. I'll close on my amendment.
Representative Owsley closed on his amendment. All those in favor of the Owsley amendment, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. Division's been called. All those in favor of the Owsley amendment, please raise your right hand. Seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those opposed? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Chair votes aye, so the Owsley amendment fails on a 7-6 vote. We're back on the bill. Chair votes nay, sorry, that's correct. So
Unanimous consent to change your vote.
chair votes nay, amendment fails. So we're back on the bill. Committee, due to the time, we're going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting here, but I will go back to just quick update on the schedule for next week. Tuesday, and a notice will come out on this, we'll be doing a field trip to DCF to look at some of their systems to get a better understanding of the cross-check. And then I do intend to have more of a committee discussion with people being available for questions on the cross-check process. That'll be part of the notification as far as an address and time and transportation. But typically on these, it is, you supply your own transportation to the destination. Representative Brownlee Page.
Mr. Chairman, did the two gentlemen who came, did they ever provide any data as to whether that was true, that the information?
It's on there.
It's on here?
No, on their testimony at the bottom, they source.
So, yeah, and that's why, once again, that's
I'm not talking about the data from Ms. Whiteside. I'm talking about the two gentlemen that came in, and you questioned them about whether there was accuracy in the information that was provided. And when we were in the meeting, we were told they would check into it to see if we got something back, if that information was true. So I hadn't heard anything.
Totally separate bill and the bills.
No, it was on the first one. Well, I brought it up because on the first one.
Representative, I think when we do the further discussion on the bills, or if you want to follow up with Gary after the committee meeting, he can follow up with a request. That's okay.
So that's why I brought it up now. I'll check with Gary, because they were supposed to get back with us. So I was just wondering, have we got that information?
And we can follow up with Gary.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, committee. We are adjourned.